Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about strengths of schedule for the wide receiver position as we enter the 2019 fantasy football season. Now, before we start today's video, let me remind all of you who haven't subscribed yet, click that subscribe button. But if you've already subscribed, click that bell notification button to know when my latest videos, live stream, go live and up on the channel. Also, for those of you who are interested, my Patreon has just been started a couple weeks back. The information is down below, as well as some PayPal information. All of it proceeding when it comes to my 2019 draft kit. All the information is below regarding that. Now, let's go ahead. Hey, everybody. Okay, let's talk really quickly. Let me preface, because I had a couple comments on the running back strength of schedule video that pretty much were giving me the idea that I had to pretty much make a statement about it. I'm not saying that the strength of schedule that I am presenting or showing you guys is going to 100% come true. Okay, that is completely blown out of proportion. I'm just presenting you three different sources: Pro Football Focus, Fantasy Pros, and myself. All three of our strengths of schedule for the 2019 season per position, right? The whole thing is, obviously, the way I calculate it is determined 100% on 2018. I have no way of determining a change in a defense because a rookie or a free agent signing or a coaching change. To be honest, many people don't have the ability to predict that. Now, Pro Football Focus, which I showed even in my last video, has the best opportunity in showing you that biggest difference because of the fact that they grade out every single player at every single position defensively for this purpose. They graded out all defenses, they put together starting lineups, and they have a total grade for that defense. Now, they do the exact sort of kind of scheduling and defensive ranking to the point where they've determined their own strength of schedule. 100%. If you're looking for something that is going to give you the most accurate strength of schedule in terms of free agents coming in or rookies being signed or coaching changes, Pro Football Focus is the way to go. That's why we're going to talk about that just in a little bit. But then I also talk about Fantasy Pros because they themselves, they're a reputable website. They themselves have been pretty good in guessing strength of schedules. And all I want to do is compare both of theirs to mine so that everyone here has more intel on the idea of strength of schedules in order to give us better, decision making, or at least a better chance of having a better season. The more information you have, the better. That's all I say. Okay, so let's move on. Let's talk about Pro Football Focus's schedule for the 2019 season, shall we? So the way it looks right now, Pro Football Focus has the Atlanta Falcons with the easiest strength of schedule. And here's the thing about it, okay? When you are playing in the NFC South, which is the Falcons, the Buccaneers, the Saints, and the Carolina Panthers, you are inherently going to have a greater value at the wide receiver position. Why? Because that entire division promotes shootouts, plain and simple, especially at all positions, right? So when we add on to the fact that we have such good receivers like Michael Thomas, Mike Evans, Julio Jones, and then I guess the best receiver on the Panthers is Christian McCaffrey, but hopefully DJ Moore will be a little bit better this year. When we take into account just how much talent that division has and how weak their defenses are against stopping the wide receiver position in the past year. I mean, last year, the New Orleans Saints in half PPR gave up the most points to the wide receiver position. The Falcons gave up the fourth most, if I'm not mistaken. Panthers were somewhere even worse. I think they were not worse, sorry. They were like the eighth most. And then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were the fifth most. So that entire division got scorched all of last season in their secondary. Sure, they could have went out and made some improvements, but even with Pro Football Focus's analysis, they've determined that Atlanta has the easiest schedule. And then you have New Orleans with the, if I'm not mistaken, that is the sixth easiest. And then we have, if we scroll down a little bit, Carolina with 14 and Tampa Bay at around 18. So all in all, these teams have inherently easier schedules because they get to play each other 6 times a year. Now, the other thing that I really wanted to point out and focus on was the NFC West, okay? What I'm talking about is the Rams, the Seahawks, the 49ers, and the Cardinals. All 4 of those teams get to play the NFC South this season. So the way it works in the NFL is, for scheduling purposes, you play entire other divisions at times in order to give other teams the ability to watch film and prepare for you and their own division rivals. So what I'm talking about is the LA Chargers this season. LA Chargers, goodness gracious, I'm fumbling. I fumbled on the goal line, ladies and gentlemen. The Los Angeles Rams play the New Orleans Saints, they play the Falcons, they play the Buccaneers, and they play the Carolina Panthers. Just as the NFC South does, they have that same opportunity against that weaker secondary with great wide receivers that they have. So the Rams, the Seahawks, the Cardinals, and the 49ers, they all have higher rankings because of this fact. LA at number 3. We have Arizona sitting here at 10. We have Seattle sitting there at 11. And we have San Francisco sitting there at 15. So again, or is that 16? I can't even. Right now, Andrew's just lost it all. I think I'm having a struggle, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, so just to kind of give you a little bit of reference on why everything's kind of balanced out, the NFC South makes a huge difference. When your team is playing against them, you gotta want to start all those fantasy prospects that you have that are consistently great players, but once you put them against that defense there, it just makes it that much easier fantasy-wise. The only other thing that I kind of saw that was similar to mine, which we'll go over in a little bit, a lot of it on the very top was different. Obviously had to do with the specific free agents that came in and or any changes that were made. But the bottom of the schedule, in terms of who had the most difficult schedule, is almost identical to mine when I calculated it from 2018's metrics. So not much change there. Again, there's going to be a spectrum between the differences. So let's go ahead and let's talk about a little bit more of another source, right? Let's talk about Fantasy Pros. Again, this is another website, but they have Jacksonville Jaguars as the number 1 team to have the easiest schedule going into the 2019 season for the wide receiver position. It seems ridiculous, right? Because if I'm not mistaken, Pro Football Focus had them at around 7. The Arizona Cardinals made a giant jump. The Falcons have moved down. You see, there's going to be discrepancies. No matter where you find your source here, when it comes to strength of schedule, there's going to be discrepancies. But what we are going to find consistently is that at the bottom of the list, number 32 and 31 and 30 are typically always going to be the Houston Texans, the Broncos, and the Chiefs, because those 3 teams objectively have the toughest schedules in the league. I mean, I think Kansas City starts with Jacksonville. And Jacksonville, as much as they struggled last year, the fact of the matter is Jacksonville Jaguars still have the best defense against the wide receiver position in terms of fantasy football and half PPR. So the way it looks right now, Kansas City is going to have a little bit of struggling to do there. Also, if I'm not mistaken, let me see here. Schedule-wise, Kansas City has to play against, their first couple of weeks are tough. They got to play against Baltimore, Indianapolis, Houston, which is always tough, Minnesota, Los Angeles, New England, Denver, Chicago. They've got a tough schedule on their hands in terms of the wide receiver position, but I think they're equipped with their quarterback play and obviously the tight end and Tyreek Hill to figure it out, right? But still, objectively, they've got one of the toughest schedules. Anything else that kind of points out to me or makes a huge difference here in terms of strength of schedule right now? I'm looking at the Falcons, obviously, but I don't know why. For the love of God, why did the Saints move down to number 16 on Fantasy Pros list? It doesn't really make too much sense at this point. I'm looking at it from a perspective of how many points the opposing defenses, especially in their own division, gave up last year. And the way it looks, it's just, I don't know. It's a bit different. And, it's not objectively wrong. We won't know until the end of the 2019 season, or probably about midway through. When we get to midway through the 2019 season for fantasy football, we'll get a better idea of how defenses are playing. We didn't expect last year the Chicago Bears to become the number 1 defense, but they sure as hell were a top 12 defense in fantasy or in general. Prior to the addition of Khalil Mack, he definitely took them overboard. They had 6 scoring touchdowns, which made a pretty big difference in fantasy points, but all in all, pretty similar rankings here and there. But let's go ahead. Let's move on. Let's talk about where I have everything ranked here in terms of strength of schedule. Now, here's the deal. Again, like I'm going to mention again, the way I've calculated this has to do primarily with the end of the 2018 season. By the end of 2018, where did opposing defenses land in terms of playing against wide receivers. All right, so if you were the best defense, which was the Jacksonville Jaguars, you got 32 points. If you were the worst defense against the pass, which was the New Orleans Saints, you got 1 point, right? So whoever had the lowest totals, as of right now to the left of me, the Carolina Panthers have the easiest strength of schedule going into 2019. Now, again, like I mentioned, the Kansas City Chiefs, Denver Broncos objectively have the toughest schedule in terms of all three of the different sources that I'm going over. But a thing that continuously stays consistent is the Falcons, the 49ers, the Rams, the Buccaneers, the Saints, anybody that is playing in the NFC South or playing against the NFC South this coming season, especially for the wide receiver position, they've got it set. Like, who's the lowest of that group? Where's the Cardinals at on this list? The Cardinals, I mean, they have the 5th easiest schedule in terms of what they have to play against. So all in all, I mean, where's the Panthers? The Panthers are number 1. Wow. That seems pretty ridiculous, right? That on my list, right, I could have the Panthers as my number 1 in terms of the way I calculated this. Fantasy Pros can have the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are my number 9. And then if we go back and we look at Pro Football Focus's list, they have the Atlanta Falcons at number 1. So again, the NFC South, ladies and gentlemen. That's why, I mean, it's not a surprise. It shouldn't be a surprise that guys like Michael Thomas, Mike Evans, and Julio Jones have such consistent careers thus far. It shouldn't be a surprise, but just taking this into account. Now, also to the right of me, a thing that I wanted to point out, the easiest strength of schedules from where I calculated in terms of the wide receiver position for the fantasy playoffs this coming season. We have Indianapolis as the easiest strength of schedule, but other teams that also stay consistent across the board, we got the 49ers up there, which are number 2 in both. Now, the question is, who are we going to trust with the wide receiver position of the 49ers? You know, information has come out like Kyle Shanahan has not given Dante Pettis the starting job. He's going to have to earn it. Trent Taylor just had a season-ending injury. I mean, looking at what they have at the wide receiver position, it's a bunch of guys that really we don't know who's going to step up and end up being that number 1 on that team. We know Kittle is going to probably be the number 1. The number 2 option is running the ball. So who's going to step up and be the number 3 contributor on this offense? Is it going to be Dante Pettis? Is it going to be a Marquise Goodwin, Deebo Samuel? Is it going to be, potentially Jordan Matthews, who just came into the organization? There's just a plethora of talent there at the wide receiver position, but we're all hoping that Dante Pettis can figure it out, maybe separate himself a bit here this offseason in order to give him that starting spot, because the schedule for the 49ers, I mean, according to my calculations, pretty good. Let's go back to Fantasy Pros. Let's go back to Pro Football Focus. The San Francisco 49ers, for them, it's a bit of a struggle, especially in the playoffs comparatively to mine. Again, that's why we're looking at all of this. And then here at Fantasy Pros, the 49ers have the 3rd easiest schedule. So again, there's a lot of discrepancy. The whole point of this is not to say that one is greater than the other, but in fact that if we go ahead and look at all 3 of these strength of schedules, we have a pretty good determination on how it's going to turn out. In terms of what last year produced, the additions to this year, and then I don't know how Fantasy Pros has calculated theirs, but it's somewhat accurate. I mean, we've almost got, we've got some identical spots here and there, but they've got a little bit of tweaks here and there that have made a difference. Maybe they take into effect, home and away. Maybe there's splits outside of just the normal points per game given up per position. Now, why did I have Julio Jones on the thumbnail? Because I really want to talk about Julio specifically. Julio sat outside this top 2 wide receiver conversation for quite some time now. I mean, we know what we're going to get out of Julio Jones, plain and simple. The guy is putting up incredible numbers, but the only issue is his red zone receiving. And, the guy in the last 2 years has caught 3 touchdowns and 8 touchdowns. Everybody that competes against him at the top wide receiver level are all averaging double-digit touchdowns. I mean, if we look at DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, Antonio Brown had 15 last season. I mean, a lot of these top wide receivers, Tyreek Hill had 14 total touchdowns. A lot of these top wide receivers are finding the end zone, and that's really what's been tough for Julio Jones in the past. Now, hopefully, with the addition of Dirk Cutter in this offense, they can turn this around. They've got one of the easiest schedules, the 11th easiest strength of schedule for the wide receiver position in the playoffs this coming season. Really quickly, I want to just mention this because of how important this NFC South is. I want to talk to you guys about where's Atlanta. After Atlanta's bye week, okay? After Atlanta's bye week in week 9, the Atlanta Falcons are going to win fantasy leagues. I'm calling it right now. So is the Saints, so is the Panthers, so is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, let me explain to you why. After week 9, from then on out, all of the NFC South on a consistent basis, week after week, will play each other. Now, let me read out the schedule. Atlanta, after week 9, their bye week, go into New Orleans, then Carolina, then Tampa Bay, into New Orleans, into Carolina, then into San Francisco. That stretch of games, those 6 games, 2 against Carolina, 2 against New Orleans, 1 against San Francisco, who gave up the 6th most points against the wide receiver position, and then Tampa Bay, who gave up the 5th most points against the wide receiver position last year. Holy moly. If these defenses don't shape up, I'm telling you, the Atlanta Falcons are going to come off that bye week and torch the league. So hopefully by then, the Atlanta Falcons have won 50% of the games prior, but it's going to be shootouts. To be honest, I'd prefer that the Atlanta Falcons be in the playoff. They be in the playoff hunt so that they're trying even harder to win these games instead of they're 0-9 and there's no way that they're going to figure it out. No. I want them to be in the hunt because I'm telling you, going into that stretch, holy moly, that's 6 disgustingly good games. Also, let's see. It's the same thing for like New Orleans. Like New Orleans has a week 9 bye. They play against Atlanta, Tampa Bay, Carolina, Atlanta, San Francisco, Indianapolis. Guys, the NFC South, that's literally the point of this video almost. We've kind of shifted. We're talking about strength of schedule. We're talking about schedules. But the NFC South, guys, holy moly. You don't have to draft them, but maybe make a trade by midseason. Like, this is unfreaking believable how you can play 5 in a row divisional games and then play San Francisco, which we know is not a great defense against the pass. I think, it looks great. Looks great to me. Now, the other teams that are in this conversation, like, sure, Fantasy Pros had Jacksonville at number 1. And then Pro Football Focus had them at like 8 or 9. I think they had 7 or 8. I have them at 9. Great. The Jacksonville Jaguars, they may have an easy schedule for the wide receiver position, but what are you going to start there? Okay, D.D. Westbrook, perfectly fine. He's a wide receiver 3. He will be your number 3 wide receiver option. That is it. I mean, what else are you going to do with that team? Unless there is a wide receiver there, whether it be Marquise Lee, Chark, Conley, Cole, one of those guys want to step up anytime soon within that offense, which I don't see particularly happening. It's going to be tough because D.D. Westbrook is going to be the slot receiver there, and we know just how much Nick Foles loves to target the slot. And then, to be honest, it's the Jacksonville Jaguars. All they want to do is run the ball. No matter how difficult their schedule is, they're going to run the ball. But then they're going to find time to use some play action, D.D. Westbrook. Outside of that, anything else? Obviously, the strength of schedule for the Cowboys, that looks pretty juicy for them. But again, if Zeke's not there, Dak Prescott is not the same quarterback, guys. In my live stream, the private live stream with the Patreon this past weekend, we went over just how when Dak Prescott played without Ezekiel Elliott in 2017, it was a mess. He did not play well, to say the least. So again, just taking that into account, that's pretty much all I wanted to focus on today. We're talking about the strength of schedule because, man, I'm getting excited for this, guys. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel. Click that like button if you like this content. I'm thinking about maybe coming out. Actually, I'll drink water later. I'm thinking about coming out with the tight end and quarterback version of this, and then potentially do a defensive video just like I did the kicker video. If you haven't checked that out, please do so. But anyway, thank you everybody for watching. Click that sub button. Click the like button. What else am I forgetting? Patreon down in the description. If you have any information or any questions regarding information on that, I am 100% happy to answer that. So let me know. Otherwise, thank you everybody for watching. And until next time, peace. See ya.